All right, we're back under the hood of the TDI 2003 Jetta 1.9 TDI with the ALH. That's the last year of the ALH, the one with the big Bosch pump, single pump feeding all 4 cylinders before they went to the individual pumps. Check out my other video. I've got a lot of comments asking for updates on this car. Check up here, I'll put a card. I did a video where I replaced this pump. I took the original 10mm pump and replaced it with an automatic car pump, the 11mm pump head. Check that video out up there. And that was kind of my first performance modification on this car, getting ready for more fuel flow. So the 11mm pump's been on there for over a year and it's working really well. Now finally, we're going to get to a couple of other things. I've got 4 big nozzles here. We're going to do the 4 nozzles. Injector nozzles. But before we do that, right now I've got a boost issue. The car's not making any boost and it's losing coolant. This coolant is empty, so I don't know what's going on. I think it might be EGR. My guess is that it's EGR cooler related. So this video is going to be about removing the EGR cooler, which is down there, kind of under and beside the exhaust manifold. The EGR cooler, basically it's a heat exchanger between the coolant and the exhaust gases, cooling the exhaust gases before they go through the EGR system back into the intake, and putting some of that heat from the exhaust into the coolant to, in theory, help warm the car up a little bit quicker. All right, so part of this project, I'm going to do a race pipe as well. Okay, we'll put a race pipes goes there. Going to replace the EGR, get rid of the EGR, get rid of a bunch of vacuum lines in here, get rid of the EGR cooler back there, bypass it, basically clean the whole place up. We mainly do it for weight saving, so the car is a lot faster. No, just kidding, it's only a couple pounds, but it really cleans things up. And if we're doing more work on this car in the future, like turbo and stuff, having all this garbage out of the way will help us. And the coolers are known to fail. I think we might be leaking coolant out of the back of there. That's why my coolant is empty. So it's time. It's time to get back into the TDI. It's time to remove the EGR and replace it with this. It's time to get rid of the EGR cooler. It's time to bring back the boost. It's time to bring back the coolant, the old G13 coolant. All right, coming around to this side of the engine, here's our EGR, which we'll take off. Now the EGR itself is held on with 3 bolts, 3 5mm Allen, kind of hex head, Allen head bolts. I have these long sockets, which is really handy. I mean, you could use a little Allen wrench and try and get in there, but these ones kind of bring you back right where you can get a ratchet on there. So there's one here, and then there's one kind of hidden straight underneath. There's 3. These 2 are easy. The bottom one you may or may not be able to get without taking the EGR pipe. So the exhaust gas pipe is coming up into the bottom of the EGR here. And there's 2 bolts, 2 6mm hex holding that on. And then 2 more 6mm holding it on down to the EGR cooler down there, which we're also taking out. With this guy, because it's a rounded one that you can kind of get in on a bit of an angle, I was able to reach that reach the bottom EGR bolt, the 5mm, without pulling the exhaust pipe off. In a lot of cases you may have to get in there with your 6mm and pull the 1, 2 EGR pipe bolts out to get access to the EGR. But I was able to get these off. So 1, 2, 3 gets the EGR loose. 1 and then 2 back here, 1 below will get the EGR loose. And then we'll unbolt the pipe from the EGR cooler further down here. 1 bolt, 2 bolt, both 6mm hex. All right, so we got 3 bolts out here, 1, 2 on the bottom, 1, 3. And then I was able to do the 2 6mm on the EGR cooler side of the pipe. Let's get this last one out here. Careful we don't drop any of these. And that brings it out. Now there's a vacuum hose here on the top of the EGR. And then another one on the little actuator down here, which we can pull off. I don't think this one's ever been off. That's like the factory crimp-on clamp there. You can feel these vacuum lines kind of pulling apart as I'm pulling on them. I'm just going to cut this one. It's easy. So there's the pipe that I was talking about here, right? That goes to the EGR cooler. And so there's the two 6mm hex head Allen bolts that connect that up. And then there's two more here. These are the ones that are generally in the way of getting the three. See this bottom one here? You can hardly see it because it's in the way of, you see how it's in the, these are kind of in the way of getting the 5mm out, the bottom 5mm out there. So you might need to take these two out and pull this off to get to your EGR. Like I said, I was able to get in kind of at an angle with this guy and kind of sneak it in there because these are rounded off at the end so you can work at different angles. You want to make sure you don't strip them out though, so be very careful. But I was able to get it off kind of all in one piece like that. There's the EGR and the pipe going down to the exhaust cooler. You can see here, she's pretty coked up, and that's kind of why I want to get rid of this EGR. I don't really like seeing that. I mean, it may be a case where, because it is so plugged up, I might take the intake manifold off and clean it out. I don't know yet. You see there is where the, right here, is where that exhaust pipe, that EGR pipe hooked up to the EGR cooler, and that's the EGR cooler going back that way. And so we're going to remove this as well. If you were just doing the EGR, you would put a block off plate here with a gasket and just block that off. Put your race pipe on and be done with it. We're going to take the whole EGR cooler out as well next. All right, with the EGR out of the way, there's two vacuum lines here as well that need to be eliminated now. So this is the one that went to the top of the EGR. Now that one goes back into the N18 valve, which is right here. And the lower vacuum fitting there is where it goes. So we'll pull that line out of here and get rid of it. And then just put a little vacuum cap on that, hard to see, on the lower cap on the N18. That gets rid of that. The other vacuum line is associated with this little tiny switch or solenoid little guy that's clipped to the intake manifold. That's what went to the little anti-shutter actuator, the vacuum piece on the underside of the EGR. That's this little guy. So same thing, we'll pull that line off of there and cap it off with a little vacuum cap. So we've eliminated two lines. You could also put bolts or golf tees or whatever in these lines, but it's just a lot cleaner to get rid of them and cap them and remove the line. Okay, the race pipe, it's time to go on. Comes with a new O-ring and new bolts that are a little bit longer. Same 5mm hex head, Allen. Get that on and get the O-ring straight. Make sure it stays in the groove. And put our 3 screws in. Okay, race pipe is on. Now we'll put the hose on. Okay, everything's all back together. We got our race pipe on now. Everything all put back. This is the anti-shutter valve. Now I'm going to leave that there for now because I may put the anti-shutter on in the future. It used to mount down here, but the little plastic clip broke, so I've just zip tied it up there out of the way with the other vacuum lines and relays. I don't know why they ever put it down there. I guess because it's close to here, but keep that all hooked up. Eventually, if we stick with the race pipe, I can clean up the vacuum lines and get rid of the EGR solenoid and the anti-shutter solenoid and just have the turbo solenoid, the N18. But for now, I'm keeping it all hooked up. I just capped off the ends of the 2 other solenoids. So now it's time to start it. Change the oil, change the coolant, got the coolant back in there, coolant temperature sensor. Check out all these videos. I put all these videos out recently, or I will put them out. We've got coolant sensor, we've got EGR cooler, all kinds of things. The next thing that'll come are the injector nozzles. Okay, so watch for that video or give a search for it. We're going to do injector nozzles and a tune next. Of course, check out my old video from the upgrade of the 10mm pump in this car to an 11mm head pump. This is the 11mm. I swapped that out over a year ago. So check that video. That's a good one. All right, let's start it up and see how it looks. Well, it runs. That's good. Seems pretty smooth. So the engine kind of shook when the car shut off like that. That's because with the race pipe, there's no anti-shutter valve. Now here's the old EGR, right? Here's the old EGR, and the little valve there, vacuum operated, see, shuts off the air to help smooth out the shutdown on the car when it shuts off. Also, this can prevent a runaway if the turbo ever let oil through or something and it started to run away on engine oil. This can shut off when you shut the key off, and that might help save the motor, might help shut it off. So if I'm upset with the shaking with that race pipe, I may put this back on. I'll pull the EGR pipe off and just put a block off plate on the bottom here, and then just mount this back up there. The anti-shutter valve will be working then. And really the EGR doesn't restrict or anything. This thing flows enough. It's dirty right now. I'd have to clean it out. But if the shaking is too much, I may put this back on. Like I said, block off the EGR with a cover plate here. Get rid of this pipe, obviously, and just put that back on and basically have a race pipe that looks like an old EGR, maintaining the anti-shutter. That's the only concern that I have with that race pipe. But we'll try it for a while and see how it goes. Anyways, thanks for watching. Check out the other videos. There's more to come on this car. Like I said, we're going to do nozzles next, a tune, and we'll see what I do from beyond that, whether I go bigger turbo or what. I might just do nozzles, a tune, be happy that all the EGR junk is gone out of there, and be done with it.